I saw a son as an adult, but so angry.
Legion is a story about an abusive relationship between a man who holds an insane amount of power and a vulnerable woman who falls in love with the idea of being loved. Sid always needed someone to show her love and affection because she didn't really have much of that growing up, with a distant mother who didn't know how to handle her daughter's powers. Her powers that isolated her, caused a literal physical barrier between Sid and everyone she cared about in her life. As a metaphor for depression, I think this works quite well, and as someone with depression, I know all too well the feeling that you can't be loved. You know, to crave love, be it emotional or physical, but not actually feel like you can reach it. Feel like it always turns bad.
He turned me around.
Parents are often unprepared for their children having these sorts of afflictions, which, in Sid's case, further isolates her and makes her think she needs to live her entire life on her own. It makes her think that she likes being alone.
You know, there's cartoons and, like, magazines. There's a man on an island with, like, maybe a single palm tree. People say go to your happy place, and that's what I think about.
But David makes her feel like she can finally be loved. He makes her feel like she doesn't have to be alone. The only problem is that David doesn't really see Sid. Sid tells him from the get-go that she doesn't want to be touched. That's a clearly established boundary that she tells David, and that David accepts. But David tries to break that boundary once she tells him she's leaving the mental hospital. David had spent 5 years at Clockworks thinking his life was over, relegated to being nothing more than a zombie who's going to be locked up till the day he dies. So, when he meets Sid, the first time he sees someone who, like him, wants more out of life than just existing and surviving, he wakes up from his zombified state. But, in actuality, David doesn't love Sid. He loves the idea of her. He loves that there's someone who now loves him, someone who's never going to leave him because she's also forced to be in the mental hospital with him. It's why David takes it so badly when Sid tells him that she's being released the next day. He once again feels abandoned, like he has for so much of his life. He doesn't like that Sid is getting a better life for herself because it's without him. Something that she is ready for, but that he isn't. So when she's about to leave Clockworks, David breaks that boundary once again. He kisses Sid, even though she tells him not to.
David? No. No.
Because David doesn't respect Sid as an actual person. He sees her as an idea, a manifestation of what he wants. He sees her as the idea of being loved, and thinks he doesn't need to love her back.
I love you. Okay?
Okay.
You gonna say it too?
I love you.
The thing with the first season of Legion is that you don't notice David is being abusive with Sid, because the show and David disguise it well, as well as David having the excuse of blaming Farouk for a lot of what he does. But it wasn't just Farouk, or even mostly Farouk, but regardless, in Season 1 we see David lie to Sid. We see him use his powers to love bomb Sid when Sid comes back from meeting his ex-girlfriend with lots of questions. Then leave Sid behind when he goes rescue his sister, before she can have a say in the matter. David makes Sid love him, and then uses his absence, uses his power, to make her never want to leave him. He lies to her throughout Season 2, but tells her it was for good reasons, always justifying why he's hurting Sid, why he left Sid, why he hides things from Sid, because that's how he can control her, that's how he'll keep her loving him.
It's how they control us. Their absence distracts us from our lives, the things that matter.
David sees how Sid spent an entire year basically punishing herself, both mentally and physically, for him not being with her, and he's okay with that. He just asks if she wants to go have sex in the White Room. David doesn't truly see Sid.
He doesn't love you.
What did you say?
I mean, I'm sure he loves you the way a boy loves his mommy, or a dog loves a bone, but...
From Chapter 1, you could see that David loves power and wants it more than anything to feel that power.
What he really loves, what they all love, is that feeling of power, knowing you've been chosen by God.
It's showcased when he destroys the interrogation room in Chapter 1, it's showcased when he uses the White Room to be able to have sex with Sid, and when he goes save his sister in Chapter 5. It's showcased in Chapter 10 when he wants to show Farouk that he's in charge of their deal, etc. David was born with this immense power that makes him think he's entitled to being worshipped, that he's a god, something that Farouk also highlights many times, which is why the turn David takes, once his friends realize who he truly is, works so well. After Sid realizes David is toxic and abusive, after David forced her to forget what she learned about him so she'd love him again and then has sex with her.
You drugged me and had sex with me.
David leaves and forms a Charles Manson-esque cult, where he finds girls with daddy issues who show him love and worship him, without expecting David to love them in return. He just needs to feel loved. Even if he forces them to love him with his powers and drugs, he wants to feel big and powerful because he deserves to be loved.
I am a good person. I deserve love.
Because that's the thing, everyone deserves love, but that doesn't mean they're entitled to it. Which is to say that a child should get love from their mother and have a good upbringing no matter who they are. But that someone isn't entitled to have a relationship with someone without putting in the work of actually loving that person and caring for them. It reminds me of Companion.
And you know that I deserve so much more than this.
Prattling on endlessly about everything the universe owes you. And I know that you think that having a few $1 million will disguise the fact that you are just a sad, bitter, weak human being.
David feels like he deserves love, and that being taken away from him by Sid and by Farouk makes him feel cheated, because him feeling entitled to love means he's justified in doing whatever he wants in order to have it. One thing I find brilliant about the resolution of this show is how it doesn't erase any of what David did, while also not portraying him as a villain, even though he is a bad person who has done bad things.
David, adult David, we can't save him. He's too far gone. But a baby? This baby? Him we can save.
The show basically answers the thought experiment of killing baby Hitler. Baby David hasn't done anything wrong yet. He could grow up and make better choices and be a better person if he had a better upbringing.
Because he's a baby. It's not his fault.
He doesn't need to be the monster his adult self became if they change time. But adult David can't be saved, because he can't see the bad things he's done. David sees himself as a victim of everything, so he wants to erase the things in his life that hurt him, like Sid, like Farouk, like his father who abandoned him, instead of wanting to create a better future for himself, which is what Sid wants for him, to make sure he becomes a better person, with his parents' love and without Farouk in his head haunting him his entire life. Instead of David saving himself by killing young Farouk, Charles saves his son by talking things out with Farouk, and being able to make young Farouk realize his ego and his pettiness leads to nothing more than pain for himself and the one he loves, David. So, Sid helps baby David because David deserves the chance to feel loved and safe, like adult David never did, which is not to excuse any of what David did, but simply to give him the chance to start over without any of the hurt he went through. There's a very common saying that hurt people, which is a cute way of saying the very true fact that victims of abuse are much more likely to be abusers themselves, which doesn't excuse it, but it does show why someone wanting to take away the abuse David suffered from Farouk would make David a better person once he grows up, so it's worth giving him that second chance. And the best thing about it is that Sid clearly doesn't forgive David.
I have to say, I didn't think you'd help me.
I didn't. I helped him.
And she's also looking forward to giving herself another chance, a chance to live without David's abuse.
I get to do it all over again. This life.
Yeah. And I bet you're gonna turn out extraordinary. Without me around.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the big point the show makes with its story is that someone's upbringing is extremely important for how they turn out in life. It highlights the importance of loving and caring for your kid, with Sid's second childhood giving her comfort and the opportunity to grow up at a normal pace, instead of being forced to take care of herself from a very young age like she did in the real world. It shows how Charles being there for his son could help so much with how David turns out.
A new beginning. What will you do?
Be a baby. And a boy. And then a man.
How it could help him make better choices and become a good person, and end the cycle of violence and pain he went through the first time around in his life.
I'm saying that war is not the answer. It's the problem. David, we don't need this barbarism.